Captain Jake Morrison stood alone in the briefing chamber of the Aurora's Edge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display hovering above the conference table. The pale blue light cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting scars earned during years of warfare among the stars. At 32, Jake was considered young for a fleet captain. Looking at him now, nobody would have guessed it. War had a way of adding years where time could not. For several long seconds, silence filled the room. Then Jake exhaled slowly. "You cannot honestly expect me to agree to this." His voice remained calm, controlled, which somehow made the words sound even more dangerous. Across the table sat Admiral Harris, a veteran officer whose reputation had been forged in battles that filled history books. Tonight, however, he looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying impossible decisions. "I wish I didn't have to ask," the Admiral admitted quietly. He rubbed his temples before continuing. "But the Varian Empire has made its position absolutely clear." With a gesture, he expanded the holographic display. Massive alien warships appeared above dozens of human colony worlds. Red warning markers flooded the map. Threat assessments, projected casualties, worst-case scenarios. The numbers were horrifying. "If we refuse," Harris said, "the Varians will consider it an insult to the Imperial throne." Jake already knew where this was going. He hated every word before the Admiral even spoke it. "They want a political marriage." The Admiral nodded. "Princess Lyria specifically requested a high-ranking human military officer." Jake laughed once, a humorless sound. "So they picked me. They demanded you." That finally got his attention. Jake's eyes narrowed. "Why? No one knows." The answer somehow made things worse. The Admiral slid a datapad across the table. Jake picked it up. "Princess Lyria, heir to the Varian Empire, commander of 3 Imperial fleets, veteran of 17 military campaigns, responsible for the conquest of 4 star systems." The woman was practically a living legend, and according to the Empire, she wanted to marry him. "This is insane." "Agreed." Jake tossed the datapad back onto the table. "I'm a soldier, not a diplomatic bargaining chip. You are whatever humanity needs you to be." The room went silent. The words landed harder than either man expected. Harris leaned forward. For the first time, the Admiral looked less like an officer and more like someone carrying the weight of an entire civilization. "You've read the casualty reports." A new set of images appeared. Burning colonies, destroyed orbital stations, rows of names scrolling endlessly across memorial walls. "Our last war with the Varians lasted 8 months. His voice grew quieter. "We lost over 30,000 people." Jake stared at the display. He remembered. Everyone remembered. The funeral broadcasts, the evacuation ships, the worlds that never recovered. "We survived," Harris continued, "but barely." Another hologram appeared. The current strength of the Varian Navy. It was nearly triple what it had been during the last conflict. "If war comes again." The Admiral didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jake already knew. Millions would die. Entire colonies would vanish. Humanity might not survive a second war. The captain looked away from the projections and toward the stars visible through the chamber's observation window. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Jake shook his head. A bitter smile touched his lips. "I spent my whole career preparing to die in battle." His reflection stared back at him from the glass. "I never expected diplomacy to be the dangerous assignment." Behind him, Admiral Harris said nothing. Because they both knew this mission wasn't about marriage. It was about preventing a war. And sometimes the fate of worlds rested on sacrifices no battlefield could ever demand. A full-scale war now would mean the end of humanity's expansion into space. Jake picked up the datapad, though he had already memorized every word. 3 months ago, a human mining operation had accidentally destroyed a moon that the Vulcarians considered sacred. The explosion had been visible from their homeworld. The diplomatic fallout had been immediate and severe. "Why me?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because you're a war hero. Because you commanded the defense of Station 7. Because you're one of the few humans the Valkyrians actually respect, even if they hate us. Admiral Harris stood up and walked to the window overlooking Earth. And because you have nothing left to lose, that last part hit hard. Jake's entire crew had died at Station 7. He had survived by sheer luck, watching helplessly as Valkyrian weapons tore through the hull of his ship. His friends, his team, everyone he cared about had been vaporized in seconds. The Valkyrians had eventually retreated, calling the battle a draw. But Jake knew the truth. Humanity had barely held on. "When do they want this wedding to happen?" Jake asked quietly. "1 week. You'll be transported to their homeworld tomorrow. The ceremony will be held in their imperial palace." The admiral turned back to face him. "I know what I'm asking of you, Morrison. I know you lost everything fighting them. But right now, you're our best chance at peace." Jake closed his eyes. He thought about all the families who would die if war broke out again. He thought about the children who would never grow up, the colonies that would be destroyed. He thought about his dead crew and wondered what they would want him to do. "I'll do it," he said finally. "But I want it on record that I'm doing this under protest." "Noted," Admiral Harris said, relief evident in his voice. "Your second-in-command, Lieutenant Danny Parker, will accompany you as part of your diplomatic guard. You'll also have Kyle Bennett, our best xenoanthropologist, to help you understand their culture." Jake left the briefing room and found Danny waiting outside. His friend looked concerned, his dark eyes searching Jake's face for answers. "So they're really making you go through with this?" Danny asked. "Yeah, we leave tomorrow." Jake started walking toward his quarters, and Danny fell into step beside him. "This is insane. You don't even know what this princess looks like. For all we know, she could have tentacles or acid for blood. Or, it doesn't matter what she looks like," Jake interrupted. "This isn't about love or attraction. It's about preventing a war." He stopped at his door and turned to Danny. "I need you to do something for me. If this goes wrong, if the Valkyrians betray us, I need you to get back to Earth and warn them." "Nothing's going to go wrong," Danny said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We'll get through this together like always." The next day, Jake found himself on a Valkyrian transport ship. The aliens barely looked at him as they led him to a small cabin. Valkyrians were tall and thin with smooth silver skin that seemed to glow slightly in low light. Their eyes were large and dark, and they moved with an unsettling grace. The journey to the Varian homeworld took 3 days. Jake spent most of that time reading everything he could about their culture. Kyle had provided him with extensive notes. The Valkyrians valued strength and emotional control above all else. They saw emotions as weaknesses to be suppressed. Their society was rigid and hierarchical, with the imperial family at the top. Princess Lyria was the youngest of the Emperor's children. According to Kyle's notes, she was considered defective by Varian standards because she possessed empathic abilities. She could feel the emotions of those around her, which the Valkyrians viewed as a dangerous vulnerability. She had been hidden away for most of her life, rarely appearing in public. When they finally arrived at Valkyra, Jake was struck by the planet's beauty. The sky was a deep purple, and the cities were built with towering spires of crystalline material that caught the light of their twin suns. The Imperial Palace dominated the capital city, a massive structure that seemed to grow out of the mountain itself. Jake was taken directly to the palace where he was met by a stern-looking Valkyrian official. The alien looked him up and down with obvious distaste. "Captain Morrison," the official said in heavily accented English, "you will be housed in the West Wing until the ceremony. The princess will not meet with you until the wedding day. This is our custom." "I'd like to meet her before then," Jake said. "In human culture, it's normal for couples to know each other before marriage." "You are not on a human world, Captain. You will follow our customs." The official gestured to a pair of guards. "You will be shown to your quarters." The West Wing was isolated from the rest of the palace. Jake's rooms were large but cold, decorated in the austere Valkyrian style. He had no access to communication devices, and guards stood outside his door at all times. It felt more like a prison than guest quarters. Danny and Kyle were housed nearby. That evening, Kyle came to Jake's room to brief him on what to expect. "The Valkyrians don't have a concept of romantic love like we do," Kyle explained, sitting across from Jake. "Marriage for them is purely political and practical. They arrange all unions based on genetic compatibility and social standing." "What can you tell me about the princess?" Jake asked. Kyle hesitated. "Not much, honestly. She's been kept out of the public eye, The few reports I've found suggest she's 23 years old by our calendar. She's never been allowed to leave the palace. Her empathic abilities make the other Valkyrians uncomfortable. So, she's as much a prisoner as I am, Jake said quietly. In a way, yes. The Emperor probably sees this marriage as a way to get rid of his problem child, while securing peace with humanity. Kyle leaned forward. Jake, I want you to be careful. There are factions within the Valkyrian court who don't want peace. They see this marriage as a humiliation. Watch your back. The days passed slowly. Jake was not allowed to explore the palace or interact with anyone except Danny and Kyle. He spent his time exercising and trying to prepare himself mentally for what was coming. He tried not to think about the fact that he was being married off like a piece of property, that his whole life was being decided by politicians who cared nothing for him. On the 6th night, Jake couldn't sleep. He stood by the window of his room, looking out at the alien landscape. The twin moons of Velikara hung low in the sky, casting strange shadows across the palace grounds. He heard a soft sound behind him and spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. A figure stood in the shadows near his door. For a moment, Jake's heart raced, thinking it was an assassin. Then the figure stepped into the moonlight. She was smaller than the other Valkyrians he had seen, barely reaching his shoulder. Her silver skin seemed to glow more brightly than theirs, and her eyes were a striking violet color. She wore simple robes, not the elaborate clothing he had seen on other members of the imperial family. She looked terrified. "Princess Lyria?" Jake asked softly. She nodded, but didn't speak. They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other. Jake could see her trembling slightly. "You're not supposed to be here," Jake said. "If the guards find you, they will not," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her English was perfect, but carried a melodic accent. "I know the secret passages in this palace. I have been using them all my life." "Why did you come here?" Jake asked. Lyria stepped closer, her large eyes studying his face. "I wanted to see you, to know who they are forcing me to marry." She paused, then added, "I can feel your emotions, your grief, your anger, your fear. It surrounds you like a storm." Jake felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't since the battle at Station 7. "I'm sorry. I know you didn't want this marriage any more than I did." "No," she agreed. "But I am glad they chose you." "Why?" "Because humans feel emotions openly. My people hide what they feel, suppress it, deny it. But you carry your pain like a badge. You do not hide from it." She moved to the window and looked out at the moons. "I have spent my whole life feeling the hatred and disgust my own family directs at me. They see my abilities as a curse. They wish I had never been born." Jake felt a surge of sympathy. "I lost my entire crew 3 months ago. Everyone I cared about died because of the war between our people. The Valkyrian military destroyed my ship and I watched them die. I have spent every day since then wondering why I survived when they didn't." Lyria turned to him, and Jake saw tears running down her silver cheeks. "I am sorry. I know that my people caused you this pain. I wish things were different." They talked through the night. Jake told her about Earth, about his breast. The wedding ceremony was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The grand hall of the Varian palace was filled with nobles and officials, all wearing elaborate robes that shimmered in the light. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it, decorated with crystals that projected images of the twin suns. Jake stood at the altar wearing his formal military uniform, the one he had worn when they gave him his medals after Station 7. It felt wrong to wear it here, but Admiral Harris had insisted. Danny stood behind him as his witness, looking uncomfortable in his own dress uniform. The Varian priest began chanting in their native language, words that Jake couldn't understand. Kyle had tried to teach him some basic phrases, but the Varian language was complex and musical, difficult for human vocal cords to reproduce. Then Lyria entered the hall, and the entire room fell silent. She wore a gown of white material that seemed to flow like water, and her silver skin glowed brightly in the ceremonial lights. A crown of delicate crystal rested on her head. She looked beautiful and terrified at the same time. As she walked toward the altar, Jake could see the other Valkyrians watching her. Their faces showed barely concealed disgust and contempt. Even her own father, Emperor Zathor, looked at her with cold indifference. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. How could they treat her this way? She was their princess, their family. Lyria reached the altar, and stood beside Jake. He could see her hands trembling. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand in his. She looked up at him with surprise, then gratitude. Around them, several Valkyrian nobles made sounds of disapproval at the public display of emotion. The ceremony continued. The priest made them drink from a shared cup, then bound their wrists together with a silver cord. The whole thing took less than 20 minutes. When it was over, the priest announced them as husband and wife in both Vicarian and English. There was no kiss, no celebration. The Valkyrians simply began filing out of the hall, their duty done. Emperor Zathor approached them as the hall emptied. He was tall, even by Varian standards, with scars across his face that spoke of past battles. He looked at Jake with cold, calculating eyes. "Captain Morrison, you are now part of the Imperial family. Do not make me regret this arrangement." He didn't even look at his daughter before turning and walking away. Jake felt Lyria's hand tighten in his. He squeezed back gently, trying to offer comfort. "Come," Lyria said quietly. "We must go to our quarters. It is expected." She led him through the palace corridors. The guards followed at a distance, but Lyria took them through passages that few others seemed to use. Jake realized she was deliberately avoiding the main halls where other nobles would see them. Their quarters were in the east wing of the palace, larger than where Jake had been staying before. The rooms were decorated in both Vicarian and human styles, an obvious attempt at compromise. There was a large bedroom, a sitting room, and a balcony that overlooked the city. Once the guards closed the doors behind them, Lyria seemed to collapse. She sat down heavily on a couch, her face in her hands. Jake sat beside her, unsure what to say. "I am sorry," she said after a moment. "I am sorry you saw how my people treat me. I am sorry you are now bound to someone they consider defective and worthless. Don't apologize for them," Jake said firmly. "And you're not defective. For they see as weakness, I see as strength." She looked at him with those large violet eyes. "You really believe that?" "I do. The ability to understand what others feel, to sense emotions. That's not a weakness. That's a gift. My people would value someone with your abilities." "Tell me more about humans," Lyria said, seeming to relax slightly. "In my studies, I read that humans base their relationships on something called love." "What is that?" Jake thought about how to explain it. It's when you care about someone more than you care about yourself. When their happiness matters as much as your own. When you want to protect them and support them, not because you have to, but because you choose to." "We have no word for this in Valkyran," Lyria said softly. "We have duty, obligation, genetic compatibility, but not this love. Maybe that's why they don't understand you," Jake said. "You can feel emotion, so you understand that there's more to life than duty and obligation." Over the next few days, Jake and Leah settled into an unusual routine. During the day, they attended formal functions as required. Jake had to sit through long meetings with Valkyrian officials, discussing trade agreements and military cooperation. The aliens treated him with barely concealed contempt, but they were forced to show him respect because of his position as the princess's husband. Lyria was expected to attend court functions, something she had rarely done before the marriage. Jake noticed how uncomfortable the other Valkyrians became when she was near. They would move away from her, avoid looking at her directly. It made his blood boil. In the evenings, they would return to their quarters, and that's when they really talked. Lyria would tell Jake about Vulcarian history and culture, things that Kyle's research had never uncovered. She explained the complex social hierarchies, the ancient traditions, the reasons behind their emotional suppression. "My people believe that emotions cloud judgment," she explained one night as they sat on the balcony. "A warrior who feels fear will hesitate. A leader who feels compassion will make weak decisions. So we train ourselves from childhood to suppress what we feel. But that's not healthy," Jake said. "Emotions aren't weaknesses. Fear keeps you alive. Compassion makes you a better leader. Love gives you something to fight for." "This is why I wanted to study humans," Leah said, a slight smile on her face. "Your people understand something mine have forgotten. You are stronger because you embrace your emotions, not despite them." Danny and Kyle were given limited access to visit them. One evening, Kyle came with news that troubled him. "I've been noticing something strange," Kyle said, keeping his voice low, even though they were in private. "There are certain nobles who seem very interested in your schedule, Jake. They ask questions about where you go, who you talk to, and yesterday, Someone tried to access the communication logs from the Aurora's edge. "Do you think they're planning something?" Jake asked. "I don't know, but the political situation here is more complex than we thought. Not everyone wants peace with humanity. Some of them see this marriage as a humiliation that needs to be avenged." After Kyle left, Jake noticed that Lyria looked worried. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I have been sensing something," she said slowly. "Dangerous emotions in the palace. Anger, hatred, but also excitement. Like someone is planning something and looking forward to it." She met his eyes. "I think Kyle is right to be concerned. Can you tell who it is?" Jake asked. "Not exactly. My abilities are not that precise, but I feel it's strongest when I am near the military wing of the palace, where General Curvan and his officers have their quarters." Jake remembered seeing General Curvan at the wedding. The alien military leader had watched the ceremony with obvious anger. He was one of the most powerful figures in the Valkyrian Empire, commanding nearly half their fleet. "We need to be careful," Jake said. "If there's a plot against us, we need evidence before we can act." "I will try to learn more," Leah said. "Tomorrow there is a formal dinner. Many nobles will attend. I can use my abilities to sense who is involved." "That could be dangerous," Jake protested. "I have been hiding my whole life," Lyria said, with unexpected strength in her voice. "I am tired of being afraid. Besides, you gave me hope that things could be different. Let me help protect us both." The formal dinner the next evening was a tense affair. Jake sat beside Lyria at the high table, surrounded by Vicarian nobles who barely acknowledged their presence. Emperor Zalthor sat at the head of the table, looking bored and distant. General Kirvan was there too, seated near the emperor. He was a large Varian, heavily scarred from battles. His dark eyes kept drifting toward Jake and Lyria, with barely concealed hatred. Throughout the dinner, Jake watched Lyria carefully. She seemed to be concentrating her eyes distant. He realized she was using her empathic abilities to sense the emotions in the room. Suddenly, Lee tensed. Jake felt her hand grip his under the table. Something was wrong. "We need to leave," she whispered urgently. Now Jake trusted her instincts. He stood up, making excuses about Lyria not feeling well. Several nobles looked annoyed at the breach of protocol, but they let them go. As soon as they were in the corridor, Lyria pulled Jake toward a side passage. "Someone here is planning to kill us," she said, her voice shaking. I felt it clearly. The hatred was so strong like fire in my mind, and they are planning to do it soon. "Who was it?" Jake demanded. I could not tell exactly. Too many people, too many emotions. But it was someone close to the Emperor, someone with power and authority. They reached their quarters, and Jake immediately contacted Danny on his communicator. "We have a problem. Someone in the palace is planning to assassinate us. I'll increase security around your quarters," Danny said. "And I'll contact the Aurora's Edge. We might need to get you out of there quickly." That night, Jake didn't sleep. He stood guard by the door while Lyria tried to rest. He thought about everything that had happened over the past week. He had come here expecting to hate the Valkyrians to see them as. The attack came 3 days later during a ceremonial viewing of the Imperial Gardens. Jake and Lyria were walking through the crystal pathways with a small group of nobles when it happened. One moment Jake was admiring the strange alien plants, and the next moment, Lyria was screaming a warning. She threw herself at Jake, pushing him sideways just as a blast of energy tore through the space where he had been standing. The beam hit Lyria's shoulder instead, burning through her robes and leaving a smoking wound. She collapsed into Jake's arms, crying out in pain. Chaos erupted. Guards rushed forward, and the nobles scattered in all directions. Jake held Lyria close, his heart pounding with fear and rage. The official explanation came quickly. A malfunction in one of the decorative energy fountains. An accident. Nothing more. But Jake knew better. Lyria had sensed the attack coming, had known exactly when to move. Someone had tried to kill them, and now they were covering it up. He carried Lyria back to their quarters, ignoring the protests of the Vulcaran guards, who wanted to take her to their medical facilities. Danny and Kyle met him there, and Kyle brought a human medical kit. The wound wasn't deep, but it was painful. Jake stayed with her while Kyle cleaned and bandaged it, holding her hand as she tried not to show how much it hurt. "This confirms it," Danny said grimly. "Someone in the palace wants you both dead." "We need proof," Jake said. "The Emperor won't believe us without evidence." "I know where to find it," Lyria said weakly. She was pale, her silver skin looking almost gray. "General Curvan. I have been sensing his emotions for days now. The hatred, the excitement, the planning. It all comes from him. Where does he keep his communications? Kyle asked. In the military wing, in his private office. But no human has ever been allowed there. The security is very tight. Lyria tried to sit up, wincing with pain. There are secret passages, though. Ways to move through the palace without being seen. I can show you. You're not going anywhere, Jake said firmly. You're injured. I am the only one who knows the passages, Lyria insisted. And I am the only one who can sense if guards are nearby. You need me. Jake wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. They needed that evidence, and they needed it fast. Whoever had tried to kill them would try again, and next time they might succeed. That night, after the palace had settled into sleep, they made their move. Lyria led Jake through a hidden door in their quarters, into passages that ran behind the walls of the palace. The spaces were narrow and dark, lit only by Jake's small flashlight. They could hear voices and footsteps through the walls, the sounds of guards making their rounds. Lyria moved carefully, one hand pressed to her wounded shoulder. Jake stayed close behind her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. She would pause occasionally, her eyes distant as she sensed the emotions of people nearby. 3 guards ahead, she would whisper. Wait here. They would stand frozen in the darkness, until she sensed the guards moving away. It took them nearly an hour to reach the military wing. Lyria finally stopped at a section of wall, and pressed on it in a specific pattern. A panel slid open silently, revealing General Kieran's office. The room was empty, lit by the glow of computer terminals. Jake slipped inside, moving quickly to the main desk. He pulled out a data device that Kyle had prepared and plugged it into the general's computer system. This will copy all his communications and files, Jake whispered. It should only take a few minutes. While the data copied, Jake looked around the office. The walls were covered with battle maps and military decorations. But what caught his attention was a document left open on the desk. It was written in Valkyran, but Jake could make out enough words to understand its meaning. It was a plan, a detailed strategy for reigniting the war with humanity. Lala, can you read this? He asked. She came to his side, her eyes widening as she read. This is treason. General Kervin has been planning to assassinate us and blame it on human agents. He wants to use our deaths as an excuse to attack Earth. There's more, Jake said, finding another document. He's been selling Vulcarian weapons to hostile alien factions. He's been stealing from the military for years. The data device beeped softly, indicating it was finished. Jake pulled it out and pocketed it. They had what they needed, but as they turned to leave, alarms suddenly blared through the palace. Red lights flashed, and they could hear running footsteps in the corridors outside. They know we're here, Lyria said, her face going pale. Back to the passage, Jake said urgently. But before they could reach the hidden door, the main office door burst open. General Kervan stood there, flanked by 4 armed guards. His face was twisted with rage. I knew you were trouble, human, the general snarled. You and this defective princess. Did you really think you could spy on me in my own office? We know about your plans, Jake said, positioning himself between the general and Lyria. We have evidence of your treason. You've been stealing from the Empire and planning to start a war for your own profit. Evidence that will never reach the Emperor, Kervin said coldly. Because you will both die here tonight. My guards are loyal to me. When they find your bodies, I will say you attacked me, that you were spies all along. The Emperor will believe me, and the war with humanity will begin. Jake's military training kicked in. He analyzed the room quickly, looking for advantages. There were 5 of them against 2, but they were blocking the door. The window behind the desk was too high to jump from safely. I should have killed you at the wedding, Kervin continued. But I wanted to make it look like an accident first. That failed attempt in the gardens was supposed to be more subtle. He raised his weapon. Now I will finish it personally. At that moment, Lyria did something unexpected. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. Jake had never seen her look like this before. She wasn't the frightened, meek princess anymore. She was furious. You are a coward, she said to Kervin, her voice ringing with authority. You hide behind your soldiers and your plots. You steal from your own people and plan to send them to die in a war based on lies. Silence, Kervin shouted. You have no authority here, defective one. I am still a princess of this empire, Lyria said, and I will not be silent anymore. I have spent my whole life being afraid of people like you. hiding from your contempt and hatred. But no more. She turned to the guards. I know you think I am weak because I feel emotions. But right now, I can sense every one of you. I know which of you are truly loyal to the Empire, and which of you are just following orders out of fear. She pointed to one of the guards. You have doubts about what the general is doing. You joined the military to protect the Empire, not to help a traitor destroy it. The guard's eyes widened in surprise and fear. Lyria turned to another. And you? You have a family. Children. You are terrified of what will happen to them if the general's plot fails. Stop this, Kirvan ordered. But Lyria ignored him. I am offering you a choice, Lyria said to the guards. Help us expose this traitor, or be part of his conspiracy. When the truth comes out, and it will come out, which side do you want to be on? For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the first guard that Lyria had pointed to slowly lowered his weapon. The princess is right. I did not become a soldier to help a thief and a liar. You will die for this betrayal, Kirvan roared, turning his weapon on the guard. But before he could fire, Jake launched himself forward. He had been waiting for this moment, watching for the general to be distracted. Jake hit Kirvan hard, knocking the weapon from his hand. They crashed to the floor, fighting for control. The general was strong, but Jake had been trained in human martial arts. He used Kirvan's greater height against him, getting under his center of gravity and flipping him over. The other guards were in confusion. Two of them moved to help the general, but the guard who had spoken up blocked their path. A fight broke out between the guards themselves. Jake managed to get Kirvan in a hold, his arm around the general's throat. It's over, Jake said. We have the evidence. We're going to broadcast it to the entire palace. You will never make it out of this room alive, Kirvan gasped. He's right, Lyria said, looking worried. I can sense more guards coming. Dozens of them. They will be here in seconds. Jake's mind raced. They needed to get the evidence out. Needed to make sure the truth was revealed. He pulled out his communicator. Danny, are you there? Jake, where are you? The whole palace is on alert. Listen carefully. I'm transmitting data to you now. It's evidence of General Kirvan's conspiracy. He's been planning to kill us and restart the war with Earth. You need to broadcast it on every channel, human and Vulcaran. Get it to the Emperor, to Earth, to everyone on it, Danny said. But you need to get out of there. I'm detecting armed forces converging on your position. The door burst open again, and a dozen more guards poured in. Jake tightened his grip on Kirvan, using him as a shield. Lyria stood beside him, defiant despite her injury. Stand down, one of the new guards ordered. Release General Kirvan immediately. Not until you hear the truth, Jake said. At that moment, every screen in the palace activated simultaneously. Danny had done it. The evidence was broadcasting to everyone. The guards stopped, their attention caught by the screen showing Kirvan's communications, his plans, his betrayal. The war room of the Imperial Palace was crowded with military officers and advisors. Jake stood at the holographic display table, studying the tactical situation. It was not good. General Kirvan's rebellion had split the Vulcaran fleet almost in half. 40% of their ships had declared loyalty to the general, refusing to believe the evidence of his crimes. They claimed it was all human manipulation, that Jake and his people had corrupted the princess and were controlling the emperor. They have positioned themselves around the outer moons, Jake explained, pointing at the display. If they attack, they can strike the capital within hours. The emperor's loyal forces are outnumbered and outgunned. What do you suggest, Captain? One of the Valkyrian admirals asked. He was an older military leader named Vorhel, one of the few who had immediately sided with the emperor when the evidence was revealed. We need to even the odds, Jake said. The Aurora's Edge is in orbit. It's just one ship, but it has capabilities your fleet doesn't. Advanced human targeting systems, faster engines, better shields. If we coordinate our attack properly, we can take out their command ship. You want to fight alongside us? Vorhel asked, surprised. After everything my people have done to yours. This isn't about old grudges anymore, Jake said firmly. This is about stopping a madman who wants to burn everything down for his own power. Besides, he glanced at Lyria, who stood beside him despite her injury. I have a personal stake in making sure this planet survives. Emperor Zathor entered the room, and everyone bowed. He looked tired, but determined. Captain Morrison, I am placing you in command of the combined fleet. My officers will follow your orders. Your Majesty, one of the other admirals protested. "Surely a human cannot command our ships in battle. This human saved my daughter and exposed a traitor I trusted for decades." The Emperor interrupted. "He has proven himself worthy of my trust. Can you say the same?" The Admiral fell silent. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was about to command an alien fleet against other aliens, trying to prevent a civil war that could destroy everything. But he had Danny, Kyle, and most importantly, Lyria beside him. "I need to coordinate with my crew on the Aurora's Edge," Jake said. "And I need Princess Lyria with me." "Absolutely not," the Emperor said immediately. "My daughter has been injured. She should remain here where it is safe." "With respect, Your Majesty, I need her abilities," Jake said. "She can sense emotions from a distance in battle. That means she can predict what the enemy will do before they do it. She can coordinate our fleet movements better than any tactical computer." "He is right, Father," Leah said, stepping forward. "My whole life you and the court told me my abilities were useless, a defect. Let me prove that they have value. Let me help save our people." The Emperor looked at his daughter for a long moment. Jake could see the conflict in his eyes, the fear of losing her wearing with the need to win this battle. Finally he nodded. "Very well, but you will have a full security detail." 2 hours later, Jake and Leary boarded a shuttle to the Aurora's Edge. Danny met them at the airlock, relief clear on his face when he saw Jake was safe. "Good to have you back," Captain Danny said. Then he noticed Lyria's bandaged shoulder. "What happened?" "Long story," Jake said. "I'll brief you on the way to the bridge. Right now we have a fleet to command." The bridge of the Aurora's Edge was a familiar sight. Amy Chen looked up from her station and smiled. "Captain on the bridge, and you brought a guest." "This is Princess Lyria," Jake said. "She'll be coordinating with us during the battle." The crew exchanged glances, but didn't comment. They trusted Jake's judgment. He had never led them wrong before. Jake studied the tactical displays, formulating a plan. The rebel fleet was positioned in a defensive formation around the largest moon. Their command ship, the Wrath of Victory, was at the center, protected by layers of smaller vessels. "They're expecting a frontal assault," Jake said. "Traditional Valkyrian tactics would have the loyal fleet charge straight in ship-to-ship combat, which is exactly what they're prepared for." Danny said that formation is designed to grind down attackers through attrition, so we won't give them what they expect. Jake said, "Lyra, can you sense their emotional state from here?" Lyria closed her eyes, concentrating. Her empathic abilities had a limited range, but the rebel fleet was close enough. "Confidence," she said after a moment. "They believe they will win. They are excited for battle, eager to prove their loyalty to the general. Overconfidence is a weakness," Jake said. "We'll use that." He activated the communication channel to the loyal Valkyrian fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Here's what we're going to do." He laid out his plan. The Vulcaran ships would engage from multiple angles, appearing to follow traditional tactics, but they would deliberately leave gaps in their formation, weaknesses that the rebels would be tempted to exploit. Meanwhile, the Aurora's Edge would swing wide, using its superior speed to circle behind the enemy formation. "The key is timing," Jake explained. "Lyria will tell us when the enemy commanders decide to take the bait. The moment they commit to exploiting our weaknesses, we strike from behind." Admiral Vorel's voice came through the communication channel. "A risky plan, Captain. If the timing is off, we will be destroyed. Trust me," Jake said. "And trust your princess. She won't let us down." The fleets began moving into position. Jake watched the displays as dozens of ships maneuvered through space. The loyal fleet formed up exactly as he had ordered, with deliberate gaps in their formation that looked like mistakes to anyone familiar with Valkyrian battle tactics. The rebel fleet began advancing, moving slowly and cautiously at first. Their commanders were being careful, not wanting to fall into a trap. "They're suspicious," Lyria said, her eyes closed in concentration. "They sense something is wrong, but they cannot figure out what." "Give them time," Jake said. "Let them think about it." Minutes passed. The two fleets drew closer. Jake kept the Aurora's Edge on the edge of scanner range, far enough that the rebels didn't see them as an immediate threat. Then Lyria gasped. "Now they have decided to attack the left flank. They think it is our weakest point. They are committing half their forces. All ships execute Maneuver Alpha," Jake ordered. The loyal fleet's left flank began pulling back, appearing to retreat. The rebels surged forward, seeing victory within their grasp. "Danny, take us in," Jake said. "Full speed." The Aurora's Edge shot forward. accelerating faster than any Valkyrian ship could match. They curved around the battle, coming in behind the rebel formation, while they were focused on what they thought was a collapsing enemy line. "Target their command ship," Jake ordered. "Amy, I need you to hit their shield generators with everything we've got." "Locked on, Captain," Amy said, her fingers flying over her console. "Fire." The Aurora's Edge unleashed its full arsenal. Human weapons technology was different from Valkyrian. Using focused particle beams instead of energy blasts, the beams cut through the Wrath of Victory's rear shields like a knife through paper. Explosions blossomed across the command ship's hull. At the same moment, the loyal Valkyrian fleet stopped retreating and turned to counterattack. The rebels found themselves caught between two forces, their formation breaking apart in confusion. "They are panicking," Lyria said, sensing the sudden shift in emotions. "Fear, confusion, anger. Their commanders are losing control. Press the advantage," Jake ordered. All ships focus fire on the command vessel. The battle became intense. The rebels fought back desperately, but their coordination was falling apart. Without their command ship functioning properly, the fleet was just individual ships fighting their own battles. Jake maneuvered the Aurora's Edge through the chaos, targeting specific weak points in enemy formations. Danny handled the weapons with precision, while Amy kept their shields strong and their engines running at maximum. "Captain, we're taking damage to the port side," Amy reported. "Shields holding at 60%. Keep us moving." "Vida," Jake said. "Don't let them get a solid lock on us." Leah suddenly grabbed Jake's arm. "The command ship is going to self-destruct. The general second in command would rather die than surrender. He is giving the order now. All ships, clear the area around the Wrath of Victory." Jake broadcast on all channels. "It's going to explode." The loyal fleet began pulling back, but several rebel ships were too close. The command ship detonated in a massive explosion, taking 3 nearby vessels with it. The blast wave sent ships tumbling through space. "Damage report," Jake called out. "Minor damage from the shockwave," Danny said. "Nothing critical." Jake looked at the tactical display. The rebel fleet was in disarray. Many ships were damaged or disabled, and now, without their leadership, they were uncertain what to do. "Admiral Varel," Jake said over the communication channel. "Offer them terms. Surrender and face trial, or continue fighting and die. Make it clear we're giving them one chance." There was a long pause. Then, one by one, the rebel ships began powering down their weapons. They transmitted surrender codes. The battle was over. Jake felt the tension drain out of him. They had won. He looked at Lyria, who was pale and shaking from the effort of using her abilities so intensely during combat. "You did it," he said, taking her hand. "You saved everyone." The Imperial throne room was more crowded than Jake had ever seen it. Vulcarian nobles filled the space along with human representatives who had arrived from Earth. Admiral Harris stood near the front, wearing his full dress uniform. The mood was tense but hopeful. Emperor Zuthor sat on his throne looking different somehow. The arrogance and cold distance were gone, replaced by something more humble. The events of the past weeks had changed him, forced him to question everything he thought he knew about strength and weakness. Jake and Lyria stood before the throne, holding hands. Lyria's shoulder had healed well, leaving only a small scar. She wore a new gown, one that combined both Valkyrian and human design elements. She had insisted on it, saying it represented what they were trying to build. A blending of two cultures. "Captain Morrison," the Emperor began, his voice carrying through the hall. "You came to our world as part of a forced arrangement. You had every reason to hate us, to wish us harm. My people killed your crew, destroyed your ship, caused you immeasurable pain." Jake said nothing, simply waited for the Emperor to continue. "Yet, when our empire was threatened from within, when a traitor sought to destroy everything, you chose to help us. You risked your life to save our people, and you showed my daughter, whom we had treated as worthless, that her abilities had great value." The Emperor stood from his throne. "I was wrong about many things. I was wrong about humans. I was wrong about my daughter. And I was wrong about what true strength means." The Emperor descended the steps and approached Jake and Lyria. "You have earned the respect and gratitude of the Valkyrian Empire, both of you, and I formally request that you stay with us to help build the alliance that Captain Morrison spoke of. An alliance based not on fear or obligation, but on mutual respect and friendship." Jake glanced at Admiral Harris, who nodded slightly. They had discussed this possibility before the ceremony. Earth's government was willing to establish a permanent embassy on Velkera with Jake as the ambassador, if he agreed. "I accept," Jake said. "But I have conditions." Several Valkian nobles looked shocked that someone would dare make demands of the Emperor, but Zelthor simply nodded. "Name them." "First, full equality for Princess Lyria within the imperial court. No more hiding her away. No more treating her abilities as a defect. She has proven her worth to everyone here. She deserves recognition and respect." "Agreed," the Emperor said immediately. He turned to his daughter. "Lyria, I offer you the position of Chief Diplomatic Advisor. Your empathic abilities will help us understand not just humans, but all species we encounter. If you will accept it." Lyria looked stunned. She had never been offered any position of authority before. "I accept, Father, and I forgive you for the past. I understand now that you were shaped by our culture's beliefs, just as I was. But we can all change." "Second," Jake continued, "joint military training between human and Valkarian forces. We need to learn from each other, trust each other. The battle against the rebels showed what we can accomplish when we work together." "Admiral Vorel has already begun making arrangements," the Emperor said. "Our fleets will train side by side." "And third," Jake said, "open exchange of culture, science, and ideas. Let our peoples visit each other's worlds. Learn from each other. No more isolation or suspicion." "This is already happening," the Emperor said with a slight smile. "Did you know that over 1,000 Varian have requested permission to visit Earth? They want to understand the species that values emotions instead of hiding from them, and many humans have expressed interest in seeing our world." Admiral Harris stepped forward. "Earth's government fully supports this alliance. We are sending our best scientists, teachers, and diplomats to work with the Varian people, and we are opening our worlds to Varian visitors. This is a new era for both our species." The ceremony continued with formal declarations and treaty signings. But Jake's mind wandered, thinking about everything that had happened. He had come here expecting to hate the Varians, to see them only as enemies. But Lyria had changed that. She had shown him that individuals could not be judged by the actions of their governments or militaries. After the ceremony ended, Jake and Lyria walked through the palace gardens. It was the same place where the attack had happened weeks ago, but it had been repaired. The crystal pathways gleamed in the light of the twin suns, and strange alien flowers bloomed in colors that had no names in English. "Are you happy?" Lyria asked suddenly. With this decision to stay, Jake thought about it. "Yes. For the first time since Station 7, I feel like I have a purpose again. Not just fighting or surviving, but building something good." "I never thought I could be happy," Lyria admitted. "I spent so many years being lonely, being told I was defective. But you changed everything. You showed me that what I saw as weakness could be strength. You made me believe in myself." They stopped at a fountain, watching the water dance in intricate patterns. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said, "That night, you came to my quarters before the wedding. You said you had been studying human culture. What made you so interested in humans?" Lyria smiled. "I found a human book in the palace library. Someone must have left it there years ago, forgotten. It was a collection of poems about love and emotion. I could not understand it at first. The concept of loving someone so deeply that you would sacrifice everything for them. It was alien to me, but it fascinated me. I wanted to understand beings who could feel so strongly." "What was the book?" Jake asked. "I do not remember the title, but there was one poem I memorized. It talked about how love can bridge any distance, overcome any obstacle, how two people from different worlds can find each other and create something beautiful together." She looked up at him. "When I first met you, I hoped that maybe, just maybe, that poem could be true. And it was." Jake pulled her close. "I never believed in fate or destiny. I always thought life was just random chaos. But meeting you, it makes me wonder. Maybe some things are meant to happen." Over the following weeks, the palace transformed. Human and Valkarian staff worked side by side, learning from each other. Kyle set up a cultural exchange program where both species could study each other's histories and traditions. Amy Chen helped Valkarian scientists understand human technology while learning about Valkarian energy systems. Danny became Jake's unofficial second-in-command at the new embassy. He and Jake worked together to establish protocols for joint military operations. The training exercises between human and Vulcaran forces were initially awkward, but they gradually improved as both sides learned to communicate and trust each other. One day, Admiral Varel came to Jake with an unusual request. "Captain Morrison, I have been thinking about the battle against the rebels. Your tactics, the way you used our own expectations against us. It was brilliant. Would you be willing to teach our military officers about human strategic thinking? Only if you'll teach us about Valkyrian combat philosophy," Jake replied. "We have things to learn from each other." Vorel smiled, something Jake had rarely seen a Valkyrian do in public. "Agreed. Perhaps we should start a joint military academy, a place where officers from both species can train together from the beginning." The idea took off. Within months, the first Earth Valkyrian Military Academy was under construction on Valkara. Young officers from both worlds would study together, learning not just tactics and strategy, but how to work with beings different from themselves. Lyria threw herself into her new role as Chief Diplomatic Advisor. She used her empathic abilities to help facilitate negotiations with other alien species. Her gift for sensing emotions and understanding motivations made her invaluable. The same nobles who had once looked down on her now sought her advice. One evening, Jake found her on the balcony of their quarters, looking up at the stars. She seemed troubled. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I received a communication from Earth today," Lyria said. "There are some humans who are not happy about the alliance. They say we cannot be trusted, that we killed too many humans in the past wars. They want Earth to break the treaty." Jake sighed. "There will always be people who hold on to old grudges on both sides. Some Valkyrians still see humans as inferior, and some humans will always see your people as enemies. We can't change everyone's mind." "Then what do we do?" Lyria asked. "We prove them wrong by building something better. We show them that cooperation is stronger than conflict, that understanding is more valuable than hatred." Jake took her hand. "It won't be easy. There will be setbacks and challenges, but I believe we can do it because we did it ourselves," Leah said, understanding. "We were supposed to be enemies forced together by circumstances, but we chose something different." Exactly. A few months later, something remarkable happened. A ship arrived from a previously unknown alien civilization, the Corin Federation. They had been watching humans and Valkyrians with interest, particularly the unusual alliance that had formed. The Corin ambassador was an insect-like being, with multiple eyes and a translator device. Ambassador Titra met with Jake Lyria and Emperor Zathor in the throne room. "We have observed many species in the galaxy," Titra said through the translator. "Most follow predictable patterns. They form alliances based on fear or mutual benefit. They maintain peace through threats of violence.